We're starting a new series today, thinking about wellness in the wilderness. The last year has felt quite a lot like a wilderness for many of us. And Kath's going to come and speak to us about wellness in the wilderness. Kath, over to you.
Okay, we're nearly there. Oh dear, good morning everybody. I don't know quite why I have so much stuff, but never mind, I've got a microphone so you can hear me. Hello to you at home. Great, my name's Kath, and I'm one of the leaders at Pattern Church. It's lovely to see you, especially if you're here for the first time. You've not been here very long. One of the things that I love is gardening. I'm not actually a very good gardener yet, but I have a lot of passion for it, and I'm definitely keen to learn. And last summer was a particular gardening high, I would say, for me. Spent a lot of time in my garden, and the weather was stunning as well, most of it. And I worked really hard last year trying to get on top of my somewhat challenging garden. I think my garden is a huge treat and a huge blessing, but probably beyond my current skill level, but it's okay, we'll get there. So a lot of time digging, a lot of time weeding, a lot of time endless Googling of what on earth I was looking at that point. And I definitely look back on last year as a real high of gardening. And then we hunkered down over the winter, try not to go outside too much because it's very cold. And then in March, I was getting in my car one day, and I saw this green stuff, like, coming out of the ground. And I have to say, I actually panicked a little bit, like the green stuff was coming. And I had a little wave of fear, a bit of anxiety. There were bulbs poking out of the soil. There were leaves budding on branches. There was weeds just appearing in places that there just shouldn't be weeds. And I felt fear first. I've got through it now, 4 weeks in. I've got through it. I'm on to joy and excitement and look what God can do. But that first moment, I felt fear. I felt heaviness. I felt, oh, goodness, I'm not in control of this thing. This thing is alive, and it's going to spend a lot of my time trying to enjoy it this year. And I forgot the joy that I'd had of being outside and enjoying my gardening. Because first came that wave of fear. For you non-gardeners, I'm sure you feel that fear about gardens all the time. But for lots of us, as Tom just said, this year has felt like a bit of a wilderness. That familiar feeling, that feeling might be familiar, of being a little bit fearful, a little bit out of control, not quite knowing what's going to happen next, not quite being able to be on top of everything that's happening around you. And we're starting a new series today, Wellness in the Wilderness, because we want to be people who are living in joy and peace and delight and life as we journey through more months of unknown. I actually think life has always been unknown, but this last year has reminded us of that in such a surprising and deeply traumatic way for some people, that we can't be in control of everything, that unpredictable things happen, that we don't know what's coming around the corner. We're looking at the 10 Commandments over the next few weeks, 10 rules of life given to God's people, the Israelites, as they wandered through their wilderness season. 10 instructions that actually encompass the whole of life and that are given to God's people so that they can experience freedom and joy and life and wholeness and wellness as they go through their wilderness period. And today we're looking at the first 3 commandments. So we're looking at Exodus 20, and we'll start at verse 1. And the first 3 commandments are all about God. And the thing we're going to be thinking about this morning is about putting God first. That's what the first 3 commandments ask us to do. They ask us to put God first. So, God spoke, and these were his words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt where you were slaves. So before God's even done a commandment, this isn't the commandments yet, this is just the intro. He starts with himself. He reminds the people who he is. These rules for life are rooted in him. He has brought them out of slavery. He has saved them from Pharaoh. He has brought them to a place of freedom and joy and peace. And they are going to be his people. He is going to be their Lord. The Israelites had good reasons to be fearful. They'd been generations in slavery under a pretty horrible Pharaoh who was not a good person. Those of you who've seen Prince of Egypt will have seen some of that. He was unpredictable. He was unfair. He was unkind. He was uninterested in the Israelites. I did a lot of year 1 home learning, and we learnt the prefix un, so I've just used that there for you. Lots of uns with Pharaoh. And they knew what it was like to live in fear under Pharaoh. They knew what it was like not to have the things that they needed, not to feel loved, to feel unloved, and to feel uncared for. And now they're in the wilderness after a miraculous rescue, thanks to God, in collaboration with Moses and Aaron and a few others. He's freed them from slavery, but they're not quite sure where they're going next. And they're heading to the promised land, this place that God has promised them with space for food and animals and family and generations and joy and great stuff. But there's going to be a lot of opposition on the way. They're going to have other nations who are already living in that land to contend with. There's plenty to be anxious about if you're the Israelites. There's plenty of unknowns. But God's first three commandments root the Israelites in God, that they are called to put God first and not to put those fears first, but to put God's first. So, first commandment, verse 3, worship no God but me. They'd be surrounded by other nations who worship other gods and who have other faith practices. There would have been fertility gods who would have been worshipped to guarantee food provision. There would have been practices of ancestor worship where people sought wisdom and guidance and instruction from their relatives who had died. And I suppose a guarantee of food and guidance is a very attractive prospect when you're living in the wilderness. There's something attractive about what that offers. And we also see in the Old Testament that worship of idols or statues, making kind of statues was a common practice, again, for things like provision of food or guidance and wisdom. And I wonder if for the Israelites it felt easier sometimes to worship something visible and physical that you could move around and be slightly in control of, rather than to worship a God who appears in fire and cloud and miracle. It's easier to have a God that you're in charge of than a God who is creative and full of life and free to act irrespective of what do we do or don't do. I can imagine there's something attractive about that. Here's a second commandment, which is about idols. Do not make for yourselves images of anything in heaven or on earth or in the water under the earth. Do not bow down to any idol or worship it, because I am the Lord your God. There it is again. And I tolerate no rivals. I bring punishment on those who hate me and on their descendants down to the 3rd and 4th generation. But I show my love to thousands of generations of those who love me and obey my laws. So we see something of God's great love for his people in this sort of the commentary after the commandment not to make idols. He's a jealous God. He's jealous for the Israelites' attention. He has made them to be in relationship with him. That is why he has created the Israelites, so that they can be in relationship with him. There's a space in their heart that only God can fill. And he doesn't want them to fill it with other stuff. And we see that the decisions that we make about God and about what we prioritize have consequences. You will know people in your lives who have prioritized the right things, and the positive consequences have been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And we will know people in our lives who have struggled and who've prioritized the wrong things, and we've seen the effect on that on the people around them. So that's the second commandment. And the third commandment is about how the Israelites speak about God. And there's consequences again. Do not use my name for evil purposes, for I, the Lord your God, will punish anyone who misuses my name. This is likely to be about expletives and swearing, but also using God's name for stuff that has nothing to do with God, to claim that you're doing something in God's name or because God's asked you to, when actually it's not. It's just because it's something you want to do. So there's that element as well, about respect for God, about when you want to do something in God's name, really making sure it's something that God wants you to do, putting God first. That's the message of these first three commandments. So the Israelites, if they want to live in freedom and joy and hope, what you worship, where your heart is, how you speak about God, we've got to be putting God first. Now, that's the Israelites. Our challenges are a bit different to those that the Israelites faced, but I think we can identify with some of it. We, like the Israelites, might have experienced bad leadership or difficult situations and be living in the pain and fear of that happening again. We, like the Israelites, might be feeling a bit uncomfortable and unclear about what the future holds, not necessarily feeling very in control of it. We, like the Israelites, know that there are going to be challenges ahead. Know that there's seasons and tasks coming that are not going to be straightforward to follow God into. And we're also tempted to worship other things, to fill that space inside of us with things that is not God. There's other kinds of faith practices that we might put our faith in. We often see this in like superstition in our country, I would say. Lucky underpants, I mean, that's a mild version, but there's lots of other versions of that. And I guess in things like astrology as well, we might see that in our culture. But maybe more often than that, it's idols, it's stuff that we start to prioritize over God when we're fearful, when we're anxious. And a helpful phrase I read this week, that maybe an idol is anything that you think you could never be happy without. If there's something that you started to think, I could never be happy with that, maybe that's something that's starting to fill that hole in you, that part of you that needs God, that's built for relationship with God, because you're seeking your happiness, you're seeking to maybe overcome some of those fears that we live with something that isn't God. And this isn't meant to be heavy. This is something that's going to bring us freedom and joy. But we need to reorient ourselves again. We need to learn how to put God first. We need to learn to see what's happening in our lives. And that's what we're talking about this morning. There's a few different things that we might be tempted to idolize. I think relationships is a big one for many of us. We seek comfort and security and meaning in our relationships, in our intimate relationships, in our relationships even with our children, with our families, in our relationships with our social group, with our friends. I have a 5-year-old, and the best friend is very intense. The love for the best friend. I don't know if anyone else has got any small people. It's very intense. Like it's big, exciting stuff. It's a gift from God. But it's so easy to put our relationships in the place of God. We're made for relationship with God. We're made for relationship with other. We understand ourselves better, and we know, we get a sense of who we are, our identity, from those relationships, and they're a gift from God. There's comfort and security, and it meets sometimes that fear of not being alone and not being loved. And it was never intended to come in the way of our relationship with God. God is always meant to come first. He's always meant to be the ultimate giver of love for us. He will never leave us alone. He will never let us down. He's the one we can depend on. When I was 22, I was having a pretty stressful, I like to think of it as a quarter-life crisis. I think early 20, well, it was for me, very challenging. Finishing full-time education, really struggling to work out what the next step looked like. I had a very lovely boyfriend. We've been together 2 years, who was also struggling. His quarter-life crisis wasn't quite so deep, but it was a challenging time. And things were pretty difficult between us. We're spending a lot of time traveling, hours on trains to go and visit each other, both lots of challenges in our day-to-day life as well. And one particular day, after a lot of talking and a lot of crying and a lot of hurt and a lot of more crying, I found myself articulating where I'd got to. And I got to the point where I realized that I was sad that my lovely boyfriend wasn't putting me first. I was sad that I wasn't the most important thing in his life. That was really hurting me that day. And we'd both been Christians for a long time. And as I sort of articulated that this is what was really hurting me, that I wasn't the most important thing in his life, the penny dropped that I was never meant to be. I was never meant to be the most important thing in his life. He was never meant to love me the best. He was always made and designed and created to love God the best. And so I very bravely shifted my orientation and tried to pray for that instead. I did pray that he would like me still. But I really had to shift and think, actually, that's not my hope for him, is that he loves me the best. My actual hope for him is that he loves God the best. And that we both put God first, actually. And that was my prayer in the rest of that year. And I found a place of such freedom in that, in releasing the pressure of that relationship and saying, actually, this isn't about this. This is about God. That's more important. We've got to put God first. The pressure to make things work in our own strength, the pressure to have the perfect relationship that all is brilliant and wonderful when you're having a quarter-life crisis, that was just all released. And we were able to put God first because I stopped trying to put him first instead. And I would say I really experienced freedom in that decision. That's relationships. That's one story of relationships. There's many, many others, I'm sure, in this room. Another thing that we sometimes prioritize over God is financial security. We might have a fear of not having the things that we need. And when we get really into that, everything can become about making that financial security. How much we invest, what type of savings we're using. It's easy easy to obsess around decisions about finance when we're prizing financial security, when we're trying to keep ourselves safe and keep ourselves ready for the future, when actually that's not our anxiety to hold. That's not our job. That's God's job, is to keep us safe and to give us everything we need. We can spend and we can save and we can give away as God leads us to when we're putting God first, without freedom and fear about our own security. I'm going to tell you a quick story about Amy in our church family. She's been on the welcome team this morning, who's experienced this really powerfully in the last year, this idea of putting God first around money. And Amy tells me that she'd been struggling at work for a long time. She'd actually wanted to leave for a while, her job, but never felt that she could because she didn't believe that she was good enough to get another job. But then she found faith in Jesus early last year, and her confidence started to grow. And she began to trust that she really was a child of God, and she didn't need to fear what other people thought of her. And a week or two after that moment of saying yes to Jesus, the pandemic happened, and Amy was put on furlough. And then later in the year, they were told at work that 20% of the jobs in their organisation were going to be made redundant, but hers was safe. But after listening to God through that period, putting her trust in him, learning not to live in fear, but to live in freedom of what God's got for her, she decided to take voluntary redundancy. She had a sense that God had something else in store for her. And the redundancy money was enough to mean that she wouldn't work for a while, which is amazing. And she had a sense of God having a new plan in place, something to do with the church, but that she wouldn't need to worry about money. Anyway, she thought about applying for some jobs, and she didn't in the end because she held on, and she really felt God had something for her. And then in November, the role for the Crosslight branch manager here at Patton Church came up, and she applied for that job, and she got that job, and she's now our Crosslight branch manager doing debt advice for people all over Swindon. And when she started work in January that week, she had just used up the last of her redundancy money. And Amy said, "Before my faith, I would never have taken the risk of leaving my job with no other prospect and the overwhelming fear of rejection. But now, as a child of God, I can trust in his plan for me." Our fear to support ourselves and to keep ourselves going can trap us and can stop us from stepping into amazing things that God has for us. There's a few other things. Possessions, I think that's about fear about what people think about us, fear of man, not fear of God. Needing to present a perfectly put together presentation of ourselves. That can make our home into an idol. It can make our, our car into not my car, but some people have nice cars in here. Make our clothes into an idol. It can get in the way of our relationship with God when we care more about what people think of us than what God thinks about us. Sometimes it's work. The fear of needing to achieve things or needing to get our identity and our self-worth from work can lead many people to be workaholics and to really put everything into that at the expense of other areas of their life, other areas of life that God has for them. And there'll be other stuff that we're all prone to, because we all do this. We all put stuff in the place that God has for us in our hearts. That's why it's the first 3 commandments in the 10 commandments are all about God, because we all do this. We all have a tendency to fill those places, those gaps, those fears, those anxieties with things that are not God. And they're never going to satisfy. They're never going to give us the things we need. They're not going to lead us into a place of freedom, a place of light. And it will be different for each of us. But the only thing we can replace those things with is Jesus. That's the only thing that we can have that's going to work to be the people that we were always created to be. And that's why God has given us the 10 commandments, to put God first, to worship him first, to give him our attention first. And I think this gets fixed by spending time with God. I think prayer is how we do this. We're going to pray in a moment together. Worshipping at home, in church, in the car, as you're making tea. Getting to know God. That's through reading your Bible. It might be a verse a day. It might be something bigger than that. It might be really delving deep into who God is. Praying, spending time with God, chatting to God. That's what we talk about at the NINE. Just chatting to God, giving him a chance to speak back to you as well. When you're out walking, when you're first waking up in the morning, orienting ourselves and our lives back to God, giving him the best parts of our day, asking him to reveal the idols in our life. What are those things that you start to believe that you could never be happy without? What are those things in your life that actually you've started to realize that God might have a better pattern for you? Sometimes we need to stop something we need to pause something. I've been, for 6 months actually, I've been fasting 1 day a week from social media. It started as a way of trying to give me a bit more time to pray. So that day I prayed a bit more because I wasn't on social media so much. But I'm at the point where I really look forward to Thursdays now because I know that I'm free from the pressure of what that scrolling and what that filling those fears can bring me. I really look forward to those days of not having another thing to think about and being free from that. Sometimes we need to stop something we need to pause something, and sometimes we need a bit of help and support in that, and we're here to do that with each other. We're not on our own in this. The Holy Spirit's with us. Tom prayed about shining light. I had a picture as I was praying last night about this morning, about God switching on a torch for us as we pray this morning and just starting to shine light on the things that we maybe haven't seen clearly. And that can be hard sometimes, but there's life and freedom to be found. God is the only place that we can experience that true freedom from fear. And that's what the 10 Commandments are all about, freedom in the place of fear. And when we put God first, when we rely on him instead of ourselves, when we strip back the things that are getting in the way, that are trapping us, they're enslaving us, are taking away our time and energy away from what God has for us, that's how we experience freedom. I wonder what your life would look like if you were living free from fear, because you put God first, because you allowed God to be the one who met your needs, to provide for you, to give you your sense of worth and your sense of identity. I wonder what the life of your household, your family would look like if you stepped away from some of those, from some of that striving, that working on your own, working under your own strength, and had some time and space to enjoy everything that God has for you. Relationship with him and relationship with others, those things we were built for, seeing his kingdom come in Swindon. I wonder what might change in Swindon if Christians all over the town got better at putting God first, experienced freedom from that, lived distinctive lives filled with life and joy and hope, trusting in God, experiencing wholeness and wellness and life in all its fullness. And when we're able to see that spreading out to our friends and neighbors and leading them to a place of faith and hope and trust and life with God as well. That's the vision, that God would set us free from some of this stuff because we put God first.